My name is Carol, I'm 66 years old, and last Sunday, my 8-year-old grandson spat directly into my dinner plate while my entire family watched and laughed. Before I tell you about the moment my son and his wife realized I was the one holding all the cards, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It was supposed to be a normal Sunday. Normal for me anyway, which meant I'd been up since 7, prepping the roast chicken, peeling potatoes for the mash, and baking the apple pie from scratch that my son Michael supposedly loved. It was our weekly family dinner, a tradition I had insisted on keeping after my husband, Robert, passed away 3 years ago. It was my one chance to feel like a mother, a grandmother, a part of a family. I now realize it was just my weekly audition to see if I was still useful enough to keep around. The air in the dining room was thick with forced chatter. My daughter-in-law, Jennifer, was holding court, talking about a promotion at her firm, while Michael nodded along, his eyes glued to his phone. I sat at the end of the table, the seat they always gave me, the one furthest from the conversation. I was just another piece of furniture. I had just served myself a piece of chicken, the skin perfectly crispy just the way I liked it, when my grandson Leo slid off his chair. He was a small boy, with Michael's eyes and Jennifer's smug little smirk. He shuffled over to my side of the table, his footsteps unnervingly quiet. I smiled at him, thinking he wanted a hug or to whisper a secret in my ear. He didn't. He leaned in close, his face just inches from mine, and looked from my eyes down to my plate. Then he puckered his lips and did it. A wet, disgusting sound echoed in the sudden silence. A glob of saliva, mixed with half-chewed dinner roll, landed dead center on my chicken. My breath caught in my throat. It felt like a punch to the gut, so sudden and vile I couldn't even process it. For a second, the world seemed to freeze. Then, Leo looked me right in the eye, that little smirk playing on his lips, and said, his voice loud and clear for everyone to hear, "Mommy says you deserve it." The dam of silence broke. It wasn't with gasps of horror. It was with laughter. Jennifer let out a sharp, cruel laugh that sounded like breaking glass. Her cousins, who were visiting from out of state, snickered into their napkins. The entire table, this family I had poured my life, my savings, and my heart into, was laughing at my humiliation. But my eyes weren't on them. They were on my son, Michael, the man I nursed through pneumonia when he was 5, the boy whose college fund Robert and I had sacrificed for, the son I thought I knew. He didn't laugh. He did something worse. He just stared down at his plate, his fork frozen in midair. He wouldn't even meet my eyes. His shoulders slumped, not in shame, but in weak, pathetic surrender. He did nothing. He said nothing. In that moment, something inside me didn't just break. It turned to ice. It was a cold, hard clarity that washed away 3 years of grief, loneliness, and desperate hope. I wasn't their mother. I wasn't their grandmother. I was a wallet, an unpaid maid, a doormat. Without a word, I slowly, deliberately folded my linen napkin. I placed it gently on the table next to the defiled plate. I pushed my chair back, the legs making a soft scraping sound on the hardwood floor. I stood up, picked up my purse from the floor beside me, and walked out of the dining room. No one said a word. No one stopped me. The sound of their fading laughter followed me down the hall and out the front door into the chilly Chicago evening. I sat in my car for what felt like an hour, just staring at the steering wheel, the keys cold in my hand. Then my phone buzzed in my purse. A single message. I pulled it out. It was from Michael. 5 words that felt like 5 more slaps to the face. Never contact us again. A second later, a notification popped up beneath it. Jennifer had reacted to the message with a thumbs-up emoji. A single, cheerful, dismissive little symbol that sealed my fate. My hand started to shake, but not from sadness. It was rage. A cold, quiet rage I hadn't felt in decades. My thumbs moved with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. I opened the message thread, my fingers tapping out a reply that was short, simple, and would change everything. Fine. The monthly mortgage payment I make for your house stops tomorrow. I pressed send. Before the screen went black as I held down the power button, I saw it start to light up again. A call from Michael. Then another. A flurry of notifications trying to push through. I shoved the phone deep into my purse and listened as it started to vibrate uncontrollably, like a caged, furious insect. I had finally cut the strings. But to understand the ice in my veins, You have to understand the fire that came before it. You have to go back 3 years to the day my world ended. My husband, Robert, the man I had loved for 42 years, collapsed in our garden while planting tulips. A massive heart attack. No warning. No goodbye. The silence he left behind was a physical thing. A heavy blanket that smothered me. Our house in Naperville, once filled with his laughter and the smell of his pipe tobacco, became a mausoleum of memories. I was just a ghost haunting it. A month after the funeral, Michael and Jennifer showed up. They brought a grocery bag filled with things they thought I needed: milk, bread, a sad-looking rotisserie chicken. Michael hugged me, his embrace feeling distant and awkward. "Mom, we're worried about you," he said, his eyes scanning the dusty living room. "You can't stay here alone." Jennifer, ever the pragmatist, chimed in, her voice dripping with counterfeit sympathy. "He's right, Carol. This house is too big for one person. The upkeep, the property taxes. It's a burden." She placed a perfectly manicured hand on my arm. "We have an idea. A wonderful idea." They laid it all out for me on the dining room table where Robert and I had shared thousands of meals. They wanted to sell their cramped townhouse in this house, combine the money, and buy a big, beautiful new home in a suburb with a top-rated school district for Leo. "We'll be a real family all under one roof," Michael said, his face glowing with an earnestness I so desperately wanted to believe. "You'll have your own space, a little suite downstairs. You can help with Leo. We'll have Sunday dinners every night." It sounded like a lifeline. I was drowning in grief, and they were throwing me a beautifully decorated life raft. I didn't see the strings attached. I didn't question why their financial planning suddenly revolved entirely around my assets. I just saw my son, my only child, seemingly needing me again. The sale of my house went through quickly. It was a painful process, watching strangers walk through the rooms where I'd raised my son, where I'd loved my husband. The final check was for $280,000. It felt like blood money, the final closing of a chapter one wasn't ready to end. The day we closed on the new house, I sat in a lawyer's office and signed a wire transfer form. $150,000 of my inheritance from Robert, my entire life savings, went directly to the down payment. My name wasn't on the deed. When I asked about it, Jennifer just laughed lightly. "Oh, Carol, it's just a formality. It's so much simpler with just our names for the bank. Of course it's your house too." They promised the rest of my money would be safe in a savings account, for emergencies. My emergencies. The final piece of the puzzle was the mortgage. They couldn't quite afford the monthly payments on Michael's salary alone, even with the massive down payment. So I offered. I set up an automatic payment from my pension, $1,200 every month on the first of the month like clockwork. It was almost my entire income, but I told myself it was worth it. It was the price of having a family again. The price of not being alone. I thought it was a new beginning. A way for our broken family to heal and come together. I didn't realize I had just signed a contract, not for a home, but for my own indentured servitude. I had just paid them to take my life away. The first few months were a honeymoon period. The new house was beautiful, all gleaming granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. I had a small room in the basement, next to the laundry. It wasn't the suite they'd promised, but it had a bed and a small window that looked out onto the bottom of a bush. I told myself it was cozy. I cooked. I cleaned. I picked Leo up from school. I was contributing. I was part of the family. The shift was gradual, insidious. It started with Jennifer's little comments, always delivered with a tight, plastic smile. "Carol, did you run the dishwasher? It wasn't completely full. We have to think about the water bill." Or, "I noticed you bought the name brand coffee again. The store brand is perfectly fine." They were small cuts, paper thin, that you barely notice until you're bleeding. The financial control tightened. My emergency fund became their slush fund. One month it was a new transmission for Michael's car. The next, it was a necessary vacation to the Bahamas for them, to de-stress. I never saw a receipt, just a vague promise of being paid back that never materialized. The real gut punch came about a year in. I was doing laundry and found a crumpled credit card receipt in the pocket of Jennifer's jeans. I normally would never look, but my eyes caught the name of a high-end department store. I flattened it out. A leather handbag. $1,500. My blood ran cold. $1,500. That was more than my entire monthly pension. That was a month and a quarter of the mortgage payment I was making for them. I was being told to buy cheaper coffee and reuse tea bags while she was buying designer purses with money that, morally, should have been used to ease the burden I was carrying. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I felt sick to my stomach. When I tried to gently bring it up with Michael, he just waved his hand dismissively. Jen works hard, Mom. She deserves to treat herself. From that day on, I saw everything clearly. I wasn't a cherished mother. I was their live-in ATM and maid. The rules started popping up. No friends over without a week's notice. It disrupted the household routine. No watching the TV in the main living room after 8 p.m. That was their time. I started eating my meals alone in the kitchen before they sat down, because Jennifer complained that my slow chewing annoyed her. My life shrank until it was just the four walls of my basement room, and the endless list of chores they left for me. I was a ghost in their perfect suburban life. A silent, invisible engine that kept their world running. Each of their smiles felt like a lie, each thank you felt like a transaction. Each little comment was another bar in the cage they were building around me. And the worst part of it all was still on the horizon. The final straw wasn't the spit. It was what came before it. It was the systematic dismantling of my entire life, until the only people I had left were the ones who despised me. My best friend Margaret was my last link to my old life. We had been in the same book club for 20 years. She was a widow too, and our weekly phone calls were the only time I felt like myself, like Carol, not just Michael's mother. One Tuesday she called, her voice bright and cheerful. Carol, I'm going to be in your area this afternoon running errands. I'm going to pop by for a cup of tea around 3. I was ecstatic. It felt like a ray of sunshine in my gray basement world. I spent the morning cleaning my little room, putting out the nice coasters, and baking a batch of the lemon poppy seed muffins Margaret loved. I watched the clock all afternoon, my heart fluttering with an excitement I hadn't felt in years. 3 o'clock came and went. Then 4. Then 5. Margaret never showed up. She never even called. I was crushed. I thought maybe I had done something, said something to offend her. My mind spiraled. Maybe I had become so miserable that even my best friend couldn't stand to be around me anymore. That evening, Jennifer came downstairs, her face a mask of concern. Oh, Carol, she said, her voice syrupy sweet. Margaret called a little while ago while you were napping. She said something came up with her grandkids and she couldn't make it. She sends her apologies. It seemed plausible and I accepted it, though a small, sharp sliver of doubt lodged itself in my heart. 2 days later, I finally worked up the courage to call Margaret. I tried to keep my voice light. Hey Mark, sorry we missed you on Tuesday. Everything okay with the grandkids? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Margaret's voice, confused. What are you talking about, Carol? I came by. Around 3, just like I said. Your daughter-in-law met me at the door. She said you had come down with a terrible flu and were contagious and sleeping. She was so convincing. I left a get well card in your mailbox. Didn't you get it? I felt the floor drop out from under me. I mumbled some excuse and hung up the phone. I walked to the mailbox. Tucked under a pile of junk mail was the card. Jennifer hadn't even bothered to give it to me. She had stood at my door, the door to the house I was paying for, and lied to my best friend's face to keep her away from me. It wasn't about disrupting a routine. It was about control. It was about cutting my last tie to the outside world, ensuring my complete and total dependence on them. When I confronted Michael that night, showing him the card, his eyes darted around the room, unable to meet mine. Mom, you know Jen. She's very protective of the house. Maybe she just thought, you were tired. His voice trailed off. He knew it was a lie. He knew what she had done was cruel and calculated. But he was a coward. Defending me would mean upsetting Jennifer, and his own comfort was more important than his mother's heart. I was a prisoner in the home I bought, isolated by the very people I had sacrificed everything for. I knew then I had to get out, but I felt trapped with no resources and nowhere to go. I just didn't know how I could ever break free. After that night at the dinner table, the night of the spit, I drove to a cheap motel and finally, after hours of silence, turned my phone back on. It was like opening a hornet's nest. 83 notifications. Voicemails from Michael, his voice cracking with a mixture of rage and panic. A dozen texts from Jennifer, escalating from, "Where are you?" to "You are unbelievable." And messages from her mother, a woman I'd met maybe twice, calling me a selfish old woman who was ruining her daughter's life. I deleted them all without listening or reading past the first few words. For 2 days, I lived in that sterile motel room, surviving on vending machine coffee and crackers. I was planning. For the first time in years, I was thinking for myself, not for them. I spent hours online looking at small, affordable apartments in the city, far away from them. On the 3rd day, there was a loud, insistent banging on my motel room door. It was Michael. I don't know how he found me. He must have called every motel in a 20-mile radius. I opened the door just a crack. He pushed his way in, his face pale and drawn, dark circles under his eyes. He didn't look worried. He looked furious. "What do you think you're doing?" he hissed, his voice low and shaking. "Hiding out in a motel like a teenager? We've been worried sick." "No, you haven't," I said, my voice steady and cold. "You've been worried about your mortgage." His face hardened. "This is because of what Leo did, isn't it? You're going to throw away your entire family, leave your grandson homeless, all because of a stupid kid's prank." He took a step closer. "You're acting like a spoiled brat, Mom. A selfish, spoiled brat." That word. Selfish. After everything I had done. After selling my home, giving them my life savings, handing over my pension every month. I was the selfish one. The calm I had felt for 2 days shattered, replaced by a white-hot rage. I looked him dead in the eye. "A spoiled brat." I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "Your 8-year-old son spat in my plate, Michael." He looked at me and said his mother told him I deserved it. "And you just sat there. You sat there and let it happen. You let your wife and her family laugh at me. You buried your face in your food because you are a coward. So don't you dare stand here in this cheap motel room that I paid for with the last of my own money and talk to me about being a child." He recoiled as if I'd slapped him. The anger drained from his face, replaced by a desperate panic. Okay, you're right," he stammered. "It was wrong. Jen and we'll talk to him. We'll make him apologize. But you can't do this to us. You can't just cut us off. Please, Mom, just turn the payment back on. We can fix this." I looked at my son, my 42-year-old son, and I didn't see a man. I saw a scared little boy who had never learned to stand on his own 2 feet because I had always been there to catch him. "No," I said. "No, I won't." He stared at me, his mouth hanging open. "What?" "It's over, Michael. The bank is closed." He let out a strangled cry of disbelief and slammed his fist against the wall. "You can't. We'll lose the house. Where will Leo go to school? You're destroying our lives." "No," I said, walking to the door and opening it wide. "You destroyed your own lives. I just stopped paying for it. Now get out." He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the cheap art on the wall rattled. I'd won that battle, but I knew the real war was just beginning. I had to get out of there before he came back with Jennifer. Stick with me to see how I plan my great escape. I had to move fast and I had to be invisible. He could close that door, but I was about to open a brand new one for myself, one he could never walk through again. The moment Michael stormed out, I knew my time was limited. They were desperate, and desperate people do stupid things. I couldn't go back to their house, not even to get my things. Everything in that basement room, the old photos, my mother's china, Robert's favorite armchair. I had to consider it all lost. The price of my freedom. I checked out of the motel immediately. I paid cash. I drove straight to a different part of town and found another anonymous motel. My escape plan had to be flawless. I had already found the apartment online. A small 1-bedroom in Lincoln Park. A neighborhood in Chicago I'd always loved, with old brownstones and a view of the lake if you craned your neck just right. It was expensive, but I had the last of my savings, the money I had kept separate from the house sale. A secret nest egg Robert had always insisted I keep. "For a rainy day, Carol," he'd said. It was pouring. I called the landlord, a man named Mr. Henderson, and explained my situation. I told him a sanitized version of the truth, that I was a widow leaving a difficult family situation and needed to move immediately. I offered to pay 3 months' rent up front in cash. Something in my voice must have convinced him. He agreed to meet me that afternoon. I signed the lease with a shaking hand, the simple act of writing my own name on a legal document feeling like a revolution. It was mine. The small empty space with beige walls and worn wooden floors was all mine. The next part was the hardest. I had to go back. Not to the house but to the bank. I walked in, my heart pounding, half expecting to see Michael and Jennifer waiting for me. I closed my main checking account, the one my pension went into, the one tied to their mortgage payment. I opened a new one at a different branch under my name only. I transferred the funds. The teller, a kind young woman with a nose ring, looked at me with concern. "Are you sure about this, ma'am? Closing an account this old?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I told her. That Thursday morning I knew they would all be out of the house. Michael at his sales job, Jennifer at her law firm, Leo at school. It was my only window. I hired a small moving company, 2 young men who didn't ask any questions, and directed them to a storage unit I had rented, where I had stashed a few boxes of sentimental items over the years, things Jennifer had deemed too cluttered for the new house. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Then I did the last thing I ever thought I'd do. I drove to their house. I didn't go inside. I parked across the street and just looked at it. The big, beautiful house I had paid for. The prison I had mistaken for a home. With my heart in my throat, I got out, walked up the pristine driveway, and slipped a single white envelope into their mailbox. Inside was a short, simple note. "I'm gone. Take care of the house you wanted so badly." And the key to the front door that they had given me. As I drove away, I didn't look back. I didn't let myself cry. I drove straight to my new apartment. The movers had already dropped off my few boxes. The place smelled of fresh paint and possibility. I stood in the middle of the empty living room, the city sounds filtering up from the street below, and I finally let myself breathe. And then I sat on the floor, leaned my head against the cold, bare wall, and I wept. Not tears of sadness or regret. They were tears of pure, unadulterated release. For the first time in 3 long years, the silence around me wasn't empty. It wasn't the sound of loneliness. It was the sound of peace. But that peace was about to be interrupted in a way I never saw coming. The first few weeks in my new apartment were like learning to walk again. I moved slowly, cautiously, rediscovering the simple rhythms of my own life. I bought a small second-hand sofa, a table for 2, and a comfortable bed. I spent a whole afternoon at a nursery picking out plants for my small balcony, delighting in the fact that no one could tell me they attracted bugs. I found a part-time job at a little flower shop a few blocks away. It wasn't for the money, but for the routine, for the simple, honest work of arranging beauty. The scent of roses and eucalyptus became my new normal. My boss, a gentleman in his 50s named Ernesto, never asked about my past. He just showed me how to trim stems and tie ribbons, and he treated me with a quiet respect that felt like a balm on my wounded soul. On Tuesdays, I started attending a watercolor class at the local community center. At first, my hands were clumsy, my colors muddy. But with each class, I felt a part of my old self, the pre-widow, pre-caretaker Carol, slowly re-emerging. I was creating something for myself just for the joy of it. My peace, however, was a fragile bubble. The person who helped me protect it was Susan. She lived in the apartment next door, a woman in her 70s with a shock of white hair, a sharp wit, and an uncanny ability to know when I needed a cup of tea. We met in the hallway when I was struggling with a bag of groceries. She didn't offer help. She just took one of the bags and carried it to my door. "You're new," she said, more a statement than a question. "I'm Susan. I make a killer lemon loaf." She became my confidant. I told her everything, pouring out the whole ugly story one afternoon over slices of that very lemon loaf. She listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she just took a long sip of her tea and said, "Honey, your only mistake was not leaving sooner. Some people are takers. You just have to stop giving." It was Susan who gave me the warning. About a month after I moved in, she knocked on my door, her face uncharacteristically serious. "Carol, you need to sit down," she said, walking past me into the living room. I was just down in the lobby picking up a package. There was a man there. 40s, looked stressed out, wearing a suit that looked a little too tight on him. My stomach clenched. "Michael." "That's what I figured," she said, her voice grim. "He was talking to the doorman, Jerry. He was describing you. He was asking if a woman matching your description had moved in recently. He called you his confused, elderly mother who had wandered off. He said the family was terribly worried. I felt the blood drain from my face. Confused? Elderly? He was painting me as a senile old woman who wasn't in her right mind. He wasn't looking for his mother. He was building a narrative that would make him the concerned son, and me the incompetent victim. It was a lawyer's trick, something he must have learned from Jennifer. What did Jerry say? I whispered. Jerry's no fool, Susan said with a grim smile. He's been a doorman in this city for 30 years. He can smell a rat from a mile away. He told your son he hadn't seen anyone like that, and that he couldn't give out residence information. But Carol, she said, her eyes locking onto mine. He's not going to give up. He knows you're here or somewhere near here. He found you at the motel. He'll find you here. My heart hammered against my ribs. My little bubble of peace had been pierced. I wasn't free. I was just hiding. I knew then that I couldn't keep running. A confrontation was coming whether I wanted it or not. I had to be ready for it. I didn't have to wait long. A week later, on a crisp Tuesday afternoon, I was walking home from the flower shop, carrying a bouquet of sunflowers Ernesto had given me because they were slightly wilted. As I rounded the corner onto my street, I saw him. Michael. He was leaning against a lamppost across from my building, his hands shoved in his pockets, his shoulders slumped. He looked like a man who had lost a war. My first instinct was to turn and run, but Susan's words echoed in my head. I was done running. I took a deep breath, adjusted the sunflowers in my arms like a shield, and walked straight towards him. His face lit up with a desperate relief when he saw me. Mom! Oh, thank God. I found you. I've been looking for weeks. What do you want, Michael? I asked, my voice devoid of any warmth. He flinched. I need to talk to you. Can we go up? No, I said, stopping on the sidewalk, keeping a safe distance. We can talk right here. He shuffled his feet, looking everywhere but at me. He launched into a rambling, rehearsed-sounding apology. He was sorry. He was a terrible son. He let Jennifer walk all over him. He knew he should have defended me. The words tumbled out, empty and hollow. A performance for an audience of one. I cut him off. Get to the point, Michael. You didn't track me down to apologize. What do you really want? He finally looked at me, and his eyes were filled with the terrified shame of a man who knows he's been caught. We're in trouble, Mom, he said, his voice barely a whisper. The bank sent a final notice. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. If we don't pay the arrears plus this month's payment by Friday, they're starting foreclosure proceedings. There it was. The truth. Not concern for his confused, elderly mother. Just cold hard cash. How much? I asked. $4,800, he choked out. $4,800. It was almost everything I had left in my secret savings account after paying for the apartment. It was my safety net. My entire future. He was asking me to set myself on fire to keep him warm. Please, Mom, he begged, and his voice cracked. He was trying to cry. I know I don't deserve it, but think about Leo. He'll lose his home. He'll have to change schools, leave all his friends. His whole life will be turned upside down. Can you live with that? He was using my grandson as a human shield, aiming his emotional blackmail straight at my weakest point. But the Carol he was talking to no longer existed. That woman had died in a dining room, covered in spit and laughter. I looked at him, my face a mask of stone. I will help, I said, and for a fleeting second, his face flooded with hope. I immediately crushed it. But on my terms. I pulled a pen and a small notebook from my purse. Leo is an innocent child caught in his parents' mess. So, for him and only for him, I will pay 40% of what you owe. That's $1,920. I will wire it directly to the bank's mortgage department tomorrow morning. I will not give a single penny to you. His face fell. But Mom, that's not enough. We need the whole amount. Then I suggest you figure it out, I said, my voice like steel. You're adults. Jennifer has a promotion and a $1,500 handbag. You can sell it. You can get a second job. You can ask her family for a loan. You can do what responsible people do when they have responsibilities. But my bank is permanently closed to you." The desperation in his eyes curdled into ugly resentment. "You're selfish," he spat, the word dripping with venom. "Jennifer was right about you. All you care about is yourself." I almost laughed. "Yes, Michael. I am," I said, and the words felt powerful, liberating. After 66 years of putting everyone else first, I am finally choosing to take care of myself. And if you think that's selfish, then that is your problem, not mine. Some people might call me selfish. Maybe I am. But sometimes, being selfish is just another way of saying you're finally practicing self-preservation. I thought I had drawn a line in the sand, a boundary he could never cross. But I had no idea that fate was about to test that boundary in the most brutal way imaginable. He walked away, furious, and I thought that was the end of it. I was so terribly wrong. For 3 months there was silence. Blessed, wonderful silence. I settled into my new life. My watercolor paintings started to improve. Ernesto, my boss at the flower shop, gave me more responsibilities. I even reconnected with Margaret, my old friend, and we started having tea every Friday, laughing about how foolish we'd been to let Jennifer get between us. I was healing. I sent the $1,920 to the bank as promised and received a confirmation. I didn't know if they had managed to save the house, and I forced myself not to care. It wasn't my problem anymore. I was building a new life brick by brick, and it was a life that belonged only to me. Then came the text message. It was nearly midnight on a Wednesday. I was in my pajamas reading a book when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was an unknown number. My first instinct was to ignore it, but a strange sense of dread made me pick it up. The message was from Jennifer. "Carol, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. Please." I stared at the words. Please. Jennifer never said please. She demanded. She manipulated. She took. The word felt alien coming from her. I thought about blocking the number, about just turning off the phone and going to sleep. But the urgency in her message felt real. A raw desperation that cut through my anger. Against my better judgment, I typed back a single cautious reply. "What is it?" The response was instantaneous, as if she had been holding her breath, waiting. The words that appeared on my screen made the air leave my lungs. "It's Leo. He's in the hospital. Severe pneumonia. He's not responding to antibiotics." My world tilted on its axis. Pneumonia. The word shot through me like a shard of ice. I remembered Michael, small and feverish, struggling to breathe when he was a little boy. I remembered the long nights I'd spent by his bedside, the terror I felt every time he coughed. And now it was Leo, my grandson, the boy who had hurt me so deeply, but who was still underneath it all a part of me. My fingers trembled as I typed. "Which hospital?" She sent the name of the children's hospital downtown. And then another message followed, one that twisted the knife even deeper. "Michael doesn't want you here. He says you abandoned us and have no right. But I think Leo needs you. He's been asking for his grandma." I dropped the phone on the bed. My mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Rage at Michael for his petty, cruel pride even now. Suspicion towards Jennifer. Was this another manipulation? But overshadowing it all was a primal, gut-wrenching fear for my grandson. He was asking for me. I could stay here. I could protect myself. I could say they made their bed, now they have to lie in it. It would be just. It would be what they deserved. But then I pictured Leo, small and scared in a big hospital bed, tubes and wires attached to his little body, asking for his grandma and being told she wasn't coming. All the anger, all the hurt, all the righteous indignation I had built up like a fortress around my heart, it all crumbled to dust. There was no choice to make. He was my grandson, and he was in trouble. I threw on my coat, my hands shaking so hard I could barely zip it up. All the pain, all the betrayal in the world, it all vanished. The only thing that mattered now was that little boy. The pediatric wing of the hospital was a place of forced cheerfulness, with brightly colored murals on the walls that couldn't quite mask the underlying scent of disinfectant and fear. I found Leo's room at the end of a long, quiet corridor. Jennifer was slumped in a plastic chair outside, her face buried in her hands. She looked up when she heard my footsteps, her eyes red and swollen. She looked broken. Michael was inside, sitting by the bed, holding Leo's tiny limp hand. My grandson was frighteningly pale, his breathing shallow and labored even with the oxygen mask covering his small face. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor was the only sound in the room. When Michael saw me in the doorway, his face twisted into a mask of cold fury. "What are you doing here?" he whispered, his voice sharp and venomous. "I told you to stay away." "I came to see my grandson," I said, my voice quiet but firm, refusing to be intimidated. I walked past him to the other side of the bed. I stayed there all night, sitting in a hard, uncomfortable chair, watching the rise and fall of Leo's chest. Michael and I didn't speak. We were two strangers, united only by our shared terror. Sometime after dawn, a doctor came in with good news. The fever had broken. A new, stronger antibiotic was working. Leo was going to be okay. The relief that washed over me was so intense it made me dizzy. Later that morning, while Michael was down in the cafeteria getting coffee, Jennifer sat down in the chair next to me. She was silent for a long time, just staring at her son. "I did this," she finally whispered, her voice raw. "Jennifer, it's pneumonia." "It's not your fault," I started to say, but she cut me off. "No," she said, turning to look at me, her eyes filled with a self-loathing I had never seen before. "I made him like this. The spitting. The disrespect. I encouraged it. I thought it was funny. I was so jealous of you, Carol." I stared at her, speechless. "I was jealous of your history with Michael," she continued, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Jealous of how he looked at you sometimes, like you were the only woman in the world who mattered. I felt like I could never compete with his mother. So I decided to tear you down. I poisoned him against you. I made you into the villain so I could be the hero. And I did it to Leo too. I taught my own son that cruelty was strength." She started to cry, silent, racking sobs. "And for what? A big house? So I could feel powerful. I almost lost my son. I destroyed our family. For nothing." Just then Michael walked back in, holding 2 cups of coffee. He stopped short, seeing his wife crying and me sitting there. He must have heard the last part of her confession. His face hardened with defensiveness. "Well," he said, his voice tight, "if you hadn't left, Mom, maybe we wouldn't have been so stressed out. Maybe none of this would have happened." It was the same weak, blame-shifting tactic he always used. But this time something different happened. Jennifer looked up at him, her eyes flashing with a fire I'd never seen her direct at him. "Michael, stop," she said, her voice cutting through the air. "Just stop it. This is not on her. This is on us. This is on me. All of it. For once in your life, stop making excuses and own what we did." Michael just stood there, stunned into silence, the coffee cups trembling in his hands. It was the first time I had ever seen her stand up to him in my defense. The first time she had ever chosen the hard truth over the easy lie. Her confession didn't magically erase the years of pain. The scars were still there. But it was a start. It was a crack of light in a very dark room, opening up the possibility of a path forward. A path I wasn't at all sure I was ready to take. Leo stayed in the hospital for a week. I visited every day. I'd sit by his bed and read to him from his favorite superhero comics, doing all the different voices. He was still weak, but he would smile, his eyes lighting up. Michael and Jennifer gave me space. There was an unspoken truce, a fragile piece held together by the beeping of hospital machines. The day Leo was discharged, Jennifer pulled me aside in the hospital parking lot. "Carol," she said, avoiding my eyes. I took care of our portion of the hospital bill. I sold some of my jewelry. The expensive stuff." She looked up, and for the first time I saw genuine shame in her eyes. "I just wanted you to know." It was a small gesture, but it was significant. She was trying. The weeks that followed were a slow, awkward dance of rebuilding. It started with Leo. He would video call me and show me the drawings he made in school. They were always for me. "For Grandma," he'd say. Then came the texts from Michael. First, they were just short updates on Leo. Then one night, a longer message appeared. "Mom, I've been doing a lot of thinking. I'm sorry. Not just for the dinner, but for everything. I let you down. I was a bad son." I didn't reply right away. I let the message sit there for a day, rereading it, searching for the hidden angle, the manipulation. I couldn't find one. It just seemed sincere. A month after Leo came home, I got an invitation. A text from Michael. Mom, Leo wants to have you over for lunch this Sunday. I'm cooking. No pressure. Just for an hour if you want. My first instinct was to say no. To go back to that house, to sit at that table. It felt like walking back into a cage. But then I thought of Leo's drawings. I thought of the way he'd held my hand in the hospital. I went. The house felt different. Quieter. Less tense. Michael had made my favorite pasta dish. The lunch was normal. We talked about school, about the weather. No one mentioned the mortgage, the fight, the hospital. It was a deliberate collective effort to start fresh. Before I left, Leo came up to me, his face serious. Grandma, he said, his voice small. I'm sorry I spat on your food. Mommy and Daddy explained it was a very bad thing. It hurt your feelings. I understand now. Can you forgive me? His eyes were wide and filled with genuine remorse. I knelt down to his level. I forgive you, sweetie, I said, my voice thick with emotion. And I'm so proud of you for being brave enough to apologize. I hugged him tightly, breathing in the scent of his shampoo, and I felt a piece of my frozen heart begin to thaw. As I was leaving, Michael walked me to my car. Mom, he said hesitantly, Jen and we've started going to therapy, couples counseling, and I'm going by myself too. He looked down at his shoes. We have a lot of work to do. I have a lot of work to do. I just wanted you to know that we're trying. The words were easy, but they were backed by action. They were trying. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was hope. I drove away from that house not feeling trapped, but feeling cautiously optimistic. The words were simple, but the actions behind them spoke volumes. I knew a bigger action was on its way, something that would prove once and for all if this change was real. The next 6 months were a series of small, consistent steps. Sunday lunches became a bi-weekly tradition. Sometimes I'd even stay for dinner. The tension slowly evaporated, replaced by a careful, respectful comfort. I learned about Michael's struggles at work, about Jennifer's difficult relationship with her own mother. I saw them not as monsters, but as flawed, struggling people who had made terrible mistakes. My life remained my own. My apartment was my sanctuary. My job at the flower shop and my watercolor class were non-negotiable parts of my week. They learned to respect my boundaries. They learned that my love was not an entitlement program. It had to be earned, and they were earning it back one decent act at a time. On a bright Sunday morning in spring, I was invited over for what they called a special breakfast. I was curious but not anxious. The fear was gone. When I arrived, the table was set with all my favorites. But in the center, next to the orange juice, was a thick cream-colored envelope with my name on it. Sit down, Mom, Michael said, his smile nervous but genuine. I opened the envelope. Inside was a stack of legal documents, filled with jargon I didn't understand. I looked up confused. Michael took a deep breath. Mom, Jen and I have been talking for months about this with our therapist, and with a lawyer. We went back and calculated everything. The $150,000 you gave us for the down payment. The 3 years of mortgage payments you made. We realized. This house exists because of you. It was never really just our house. Jennifer picked up where he left off, her voice steady and clear. She slid one of the documents across the table towards me. It was a quitclaim deed. This isn't charity, Carol, she said, looking me directly in the eye. It's justice. We had a lawyer officially add you to the title. This document gives you 50% legal ownership of the house. It's your asset, your security, your home officially, just as it should have been from the start. I stared at the paper, at my name printed in crisp, black ink next to theirs. I couldn't speak. The tears I had held back for so long finally came, but they weren't tears of pain or anger. They were tears of validation. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the house. It was about this acknowledgement, this profound act of making things right. Say yes, Grandma, Leo whispered, putting his small hand on mine. Say you'll be our house partner. I looked at my grandson's hopeful face. I looked at my son, who was finally becoming the man Robert would have been proud of. I looked at my daughter-in-law, who had found the strength to face her own demons. And I finally understood. I accept, I said, my voice thick with tears. My life now is nothing like I imagined it would be, but it is rich and it is real. I still live in my own apartment. My independence is precious. But I am not alone. I am a co-owner of a home where I am treated with love and respect. I have a grandson who is learning that love and boundaries can and must coexist. I have a son and daughter-in-law who are actively working to be better people. I had to lose my family to teach them how to value me. It was the hardest, most painful lesson of my life, but it gave me back my dignity, and it gave us all a second chance. Sometimes the most powerful act of love for your family is to first love yourself enough to walk away. It is the only way they will ever learn the true cost of your presence. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but I hope it can help someone else who might be feeling invisible in their own life. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect your own peace? Please share your experience in the comments below. Your story matters. And if my story resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more. Remember, you are worthy of respect, and you are never ever alone.